Good evening and welcome to the Monday night edition of The People Show. I'm Mark Wallace. Charles Thomas is out this evening. He'll be back with us next week. We thank you for tuning in to IntellectualRadio.com as we are live on Facebook and YouTube. Our telephone number is 708-223-8953, 708-223-8953. We'd love for you to join us tonight for a lively conversation about a whole host of issues that are going on. We're going to be talking about what everybody has been talking about since the news broke on last week. The former president, Donald Trump, has been indicted on 37 counts. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later on in the broadcast. We're also going to be talking with the chief academic officer for the urban prep schools that is now being taken over by CPS, and there's an effort to reverse that decision. And we're going to be talking with the officer about that, and his name is Dennis Lacewell, so he'll be my guest coming up later on in the hour, and then we'll be certainly taking your phone calls at 708-223-8953. A lot of things that are going on, some things that we didn't talk about last week that I think that have happened, and certainly some things that happened today. Today actually marks the 63rd anniversary of the assassination of Medgar Evers, and his wife is 90 years old. Myrlie Evers is 90 years old, and she was on CBS this morning and did a special interview with Gayle King. And I watched that interview, and I've always thought that she was such a gracious woman living through that experience and still dealing with that. And she it was just one of those powerful conversations that she said some very interesting things and talked about different emotions that she had to deal with in terms of having thoughts of vengeance and revenge for the person who murdered her husband and those who were behind it. And of course, there were two trials that had hung juries on them. And then in 1994, with new evidence that came in, and in that trial, there was a verdict that was in favor of finding the person guilty for committing that heinous act of gunning Medgar Evers down in his walkway on that fateful day. So I thought that was very poignant, and she had her daughter there who has been by her side in that effort. And sorry about that. I wanted to point some of those things out. She had did one of those self to you letters that has been a kind of a signature thing with on CBS this morning. But it is it's a stark reminder, in my opinion, to us that I know that there are those who want to suggest that the days of that type of hatred is behind us, and that there aren't people who wish harm on you just because your skin is black, just because you belong to a community of black people. There are people who just despise you because of your ethnicity. And I think that what these last 7 years or so has demonstrated to us is that hate has been masked in a lot of respects. But I think that the former president has poured gasoline on that and have given people the license to their hate because of certain behavior that he has demonstrated as the person at the highest position. So I think in a lot of regards, he has fueled that and has, unleashed what many had considered to be not what it was, and that it was a thing of the past, when in fact it has just been repackaged in many respects. Now, that is not to say that everybody um, from other ethnicities are evil people, inherently evil people. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. What I'm saying is that there are people who are still out there and of that mindset, and there are many people that are of that mindset that uh, see Black people as being inferior, and not having any value for no other reason other than the fact that we are Black. And I think that this um, this individual certainly has given people uh, a pathway and a license to act out that evilness and to unleash it across this country. Um, and I think we are seeing more of that with what this indictment has brought out. And you have people who are fueling that, not maybe intendedly, but are fueling that. And hopefully we don't see acts of violence because of people's are aggrieved at what is happening to the former president. Uh, Much to his own doing and his own fault. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the program. Other things that are happening in the news: Chuck Todd will be departing NBC's Meet the Press, and Christian Welker to become the host of Meet the Press. And she is a Black woman, and she will be the first Black woman since I believe it was 1951 to host Meet the Press. I think that's a good thing and a big deal. She has been doing a great job on NBC and MSNBC for this time, but so she is going to be taking over that position in the coming when Chuck Todd finally signs off, and I believe that is supposed to be happening within the next couple of months or so. And then on last Tuesday, there was unfortunately another mass shooting in Virginia at the Argonaut High School graduation. 2 people killed in that mass shooting, and I believe 7 other people that were hurt. I mean, here it is again. And of course, it is because people have such easy access to guns. And it is reported that the assailant knew at least one of the victims, and that he had multiple firearms on him at a graduation of all places here back in Virginia. And again, on Thursday, there was a ruling at the Supreme Court rules that the Alabama um, um, congressional remapping map is likely illegal, which was surprising to many that some of the conservatives would side with the liberals or progressive or whatever you want to call them, would you know side with those on the left that said that was likely illegal. And basically, Black people make up about 25% of Alabama, and they had basically remapped that they would only have one representative, and the court said that no, that they in fact should have at least 2 representatives. So this means that there are many other legislatures throughout the South that this ruling may come down. Now, there's some who are saying that they may have ruled this way in favor of this in order for them to do away with the affirmative action piece in terms of college not using race as a part of determining who actually and how many students would actually get into colleges. So we'll see where that decision falls, and if in fact they rule to get rid of it. But I think that for the voting rights, that um, Justice Roberts, who wrote the opinion, um, sided with them and Judge Kavanaugh. Interesting enough, the other black male, Clarence Thomas, did not rule with them. He decided that black folks had enough representation by voting against it. So no surprise, but I think that it's interesting enough to note that, because I don't know, and I have not heard anybody really point that out or talk about that, but I thought that it was interestingly enough that the one other black male, and of course, the Justice Jackson voted with the others in saying that it was illegal. But Clarence Thomas did not think that the remapping was not illegal. So, but who's surprised at that, right? I'm certainly not surprised at that dealing. So, and on another local front, there was a man who was on the roof of a building in Humboldt Park on the west side of the Chicago area, with a swastika flag and an upside down American flag on the top of a building in a 12-hour standoff. I think it was a 12 or 14-hour standoff with police that ultimately ended when they found the man dead by apparent suicide. And there was further reports that he was somewhat aggrieved because he was on top of a building that he had once owned and operated his business out of. And his brother said that after their mother died, he started to fall off the rails and not be able to handle things very well. And his brother said that he was a bit surprised because he didn't think that there was any real racial animus to his brother, other than his brother was starting to have some problems. And he said that he and his brother had not communicated for a number of years after their mother had passed away. But he said that he didn't believe that his brother had any real racist animus because they were born and raised largely in an African-American community. So he believes that a lot of this had to do with his brother just not being able to handle the death of his mother. And so, unfortunately, that tragically ended by him dying of suicide. So, many things that we have to talk about, and we're going to be talking about that and talking about, of course, we're going to have our special guests to come on. To have that conversation. Some other news that came out, the decision that came out, and I think we did talk about this briefly, that in Oak Brook won the decision of the red light camera fight that Oak Brook Terrace had gotten a red light camera put up there at 22nd and Route 83, which is right at the entrance of Oak Park, where everybody goes into the Oak Brook area to go to the Oak Brook Mall. So this was something that was kind of done in the dead of the night, where on 3 or 4 occasions before, the Illinois Department of Transportation denied the application for Oak Brook Terrace to put that camera there. But of course, after a corrupt scheme with the late Martin Sandoval and others, they got a red light camera there. But the fight continued. We supported that fight with Oak Brook Terrace in fighting that red light camera there at an intersection that had been deemed report after report, study after study, that it was a relatively safe intersection, although heavily traveled, that it was a safe intersection, and there was no need to put a red light camera there other than the fact to generate a lot of revenue for Oak Brook Terrace. I spoke at the Oak Brook Terrace um, city council meeting relative to this red light camera, and they gave us the opportunity to speak on behalf of the citizens and certainly on behalf of Oak Brook. When this first went down, and we are grateful for that decision. Recently, there has been a new bill that has come out, House Bill 3903, which is red light camera legislation regarding political contributions, that anybody involved with a red light camera company can't make contributions to political groups to support other politicians, and politicians can't work for red light camera companies. So this is supposed to make sure that it is a arm's length, or certainly there is no interference with respect to the red light camera companies getting contracts to provide that service, if you will, to different municipalities within Illinois. But we'll see how that actually works out. You know, they always find a way to funnel money. So we're continuing that fight to end that, as we still have the lawsuits that are moving forward in Crestwood, Illinois, as well as we have an appeal that is moving forward in Stone Park, Illinois. So we are still fighting that issue. You just have to keep chipping away at it. These are sometimes long, protracted type fights, and you chip away at it little by little until you get the ultimate decision, and certainly the ultimate victory that you need on behalf of citizens. Obviously, it is a ton of money that many of these municipalities, in our opinion, have become addicted to, supporting and balancing their budgets on the backs of people who can least afford it, and hit hardest the working class and poor, hit the hardest with these, in particular here in Chicago, where we have red light cameras and speed cameras. And we still have the dubious honor in the country of being the city that has the most red light cameras, not the most speed cameras, but the most red light cameras in the country. And 40% of those cameras were installed at locations where the study demonstrated that those cameras caused more accidents because they were placed at intersections that had no crash problems in the first place. 40% of the cameras in Chicago, imagine that, 40% of those cameras were placed at intersections that didn't have a crash problem in the first place, and caused an increase of crashes overall. And they still haven't done anything with it. Of course, Brandon Johnson, our new mayor, has said that he wants to phase out these cameras, and we are still hoping that he is going to follow through with that. He's only been in office, a little over a month now, so he's not going to fix all of the problems overnight. And I still support the mayor, but we are anxiously awaiting for them to make decisions to start moving toward phasing that system out. And I call upon the mayor to, at the very least, reverse that decision that Lori Lightfoot made by lowering that threshold from 10 miles an hour to 6 miles an hour to get a $35 ticket. And by doing so, they have generated over $185 million just in $35 tickets in a 2-year period. That's a ton of money. And even so just to kind of put this in context, in the state law in the Illinois traffic code. No municipality, no police officer can give anybody a ticket for going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. So you cannot be giving a ticket for going 5 miles over the speed limit. So what the mayor did was she decided to make it basically a zero tolerance factor, is that if you go, all right, we can't give you a ticket for going 5 miles, but if you go 6 miles, we're going to give you a ticket. So that's in effect what they did, because the Illinois Vehicle Code and the statute does not permit any municipality, whether it's a police officer or not, you cannot give a person a ticket for going 5 miles over any speed limit. But you go 6 miles over the speed limit in Chicago, you get a $35 ticket. I think that's a bit egregious. And of course, it is demonstrated to show that there are a lot of people in our communities that have received those tickets. And talking to bankruptcy attorneys, and one of the companies that have the largest bankruptcy firm in the country, Debt Stoppers, they provided information to show that their bankruptcy filings have increased by more than 30%, all largely due to tickets, parking tickets, and red light camera and speed camera tickets in Chicago. 30%, all directly connected to the ticketing. So that fight is still going on. We still ask for your support. Call your alderman in your ward and ask your alderman to please and fight for reversing that decision and getting rid of those cameras. There's better ways for us to generate revenue. One of the best ways to generate revenue is by expanding the tax base, and you expand the tax base by creating jobs. And there's certainly ways of doing that. There just has to be a will to do it. And we certainly don't want to use these systems. And of course, there was a Supreme Court ruling that said that local municipalities should not be using fines and fees to balance their budgets. And that came from a case out of Indiana when the Supreme Court ruled against the lower court wanting to confiscate a person who had been convicted of a drug charge, and the maximum fine for the drug charge was $10,000, but they wanted to take his $65,000 vehicle and confiscate it. And of course, they appealed it. The lower court, appellate court upheld it. The state Supreme Court upheld it, but the United States Supreme Court reversed that decision in a 9-0 ruling. So even the Supreme Court has weighed in on fines and fees, suggesting that municipalities should not be using them to balance their budgets. They should find another way to do that. All right, so we're going to be talking about all of that, and we'll be taking your phone calls at 708-223-8953, 708-223-8953. Some other things happen. There's the minimum wage is going up in Illinois. So the minimum wage will be going up, I believe, in the next month or so, that it'll be going up to $13.70 an hour. So all hourly wage people in Illinois will be getting a raise. So the fight for 15 and the increase of pay scales are going up. Now, although nobody can support themselves off of, $15 an hour, but at least it is going in the right direction. I think that, a livable wage is more like $22 to $25 an hour. And I'm not sure why. I am sure why. We know that greed has certainly gotten in the way of making sure that workers are being paid. But I think workers during the pandemic has demonstrated that they have options, and why some companies are having a hard time finding workers is because there are other companies that are paying more, and workers are leaving their jobs, not being in fear of not finding another job. And some companies are having a hard time finding workers because, I think in large part, because they're not being competitive in their salary. And I think that that is a good thing, that people should be paid a livable wage for helping businesses make the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars that they make. And that should be shared with the people who do the hard work at the very ground level. They certainly should be treated equitably and fairly. All right, so we're going to be taking a break, and when we come back, we are going to bring our guest, Dennis Lacewell, who is the Chief Academic Officer from the Urban Prep, and we're going to be talking about what is happening with Urban Prep and why, and we'll get the full story when we come back right after this. Welcome back to the program. I'm Mark Wallace, your host of this Monday night edition of The People's Show. And we thank you for tuning in. Our telephone number here is 708-223-8953, 708-223-8953. We are streaming live at Facebook and YouTube as well. All right, we're going to be talking about in this segment of the program, and it could go over a little longer, but we have in studio with us my guest, who is the Chief Academic Officer at the Urban Prep School. As you know, the Urban Prep Schools have been operating for the past 17 years in Inglewood and in Bronzeville, providing excellent education to Black males. And there has been a decision by CPS to take over of those two schools, which are charter schools. And in full disclosure, I have not been a proponent of charter schools. However, with this particular school, which has proven itself over the past 17 years for providing a good education to African American males, which I believe we'll talk about that 100% of the graduates have all at least qualified to go to college, and we'll talk more about that to get the facts about that. But what we want to talk about tonight is what is happening with Urban Prep and why this has happened. I received a phone call from Brother Craig Wimberly. I had heard about this in the news. However, I had not paid a whole lot of attention to the details. I had heard about it in the news that CPS was moving to take over Urban Prep. And while I thought about it and wondered why in my mind, I had not taken any action towards trying to find out more, but I'd received a call from the president of COLE, the Coalition of African American Leaders, about this issue and asking for me to get involved. And so I told him I wanted to get more information about it. And as I said to Craig, I said, well, I'm not a big proponent of charter schools, but I do celebrate what Urban Prep has done. And so I wanted to get more information about it and asked if you would come into the studio, and you agreed. So if you can give me some background, give us some background as to um, what Urban Prep has, how they have been able to perform, and to what brought us to where we are now, that CPS has decided to take over Urban Prep.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the time to come speak with you today. But Urban Prep, we were founded in 2006, our first campus. Actually, Urban Prep Academy's nonprofit organization, we were founded in 2002. In 2006, we opened the first all-male public charter school for boys in the nation. And we made a promise, in 2006 to the Inglewood community that we were going to address the dismal rate in which CPS had been educating Black boys. The University of Chicago did a study in 2005 on the percent of young Black males who started at CPS school at 13, ninth grade, how many of them had a 4-year college degree by the age of 26? And it was only 2.5%. And so we wanted to address that. And so we made a promise then that we would ensure that 100% of our graduates would be accepted to a 4-year college. Some people think that's not a big deal, but College Board did a study back in 2011 that nationwide, only 30% of African-American males graduated high school with the minimum requirements to be accepted to a 4-year college. So for a school to set out back in 2006, before we actually did it, that we were going to ensure that 100% of our young men graduated and were accepted to a 4-year college. And we've done that for 14 consecutive years. And so we fulfill that promise to the community. And so, as you stated, we've had success not based on what we say, but based on what third-party metrics say, from the University of Chicago to CPS's own system. Last year, CPS data show that Urban Prep graduates graduated at a 91% graduation rate, where CPS Black males were 65%. And actually ISB, Illinois State Board of Education, and you go to their website and you can type in the schools, Urban Prep schools, 91% graduation rate, CPS 65% graduation for Black males. And so we've had this success over an extended period of time. Unfortunately, it came out, and these allegations against Urban Prep came out accusing Urban Prep of financial mismanagement. It was very ironic. In January of 2022, we received a formal letter from CPS stating that they were pleased with the progress we made financially and that we exceeded the financial scorecard in terms of different metrics for charter schools, and that we've done well. In February, a month later, they then sent us a memo stating that they had issues with our financial practices, and they specifically went back to fiscal years 2015 and 16, I believe it was. Well, it was during Governor Ronner's term as governor of the state of Illinois, where we all know for 2 years there was no state budget. CPS thus cut budget 2 years in a row in the middle of the fiscal year for charter schools. And so unlike other schools, we did not cut teachers. Our teachers are unionized with the CTU. We did not cut any teaching positions, and we did not cut any programming for our students. But we did, take out loans and credit in order to make sure we, ends met. And so CPS stated issue with that. But we did not default on any of those loans. We did not have penalty on any of those loans. We did not miss any payrolls in the 17-year history of Urban Prep. We've had clean audits. We've raised over $10 million. We haven't missed a payroll. Everything has always been in order. And CPS just raised issue with that. But again, and that's what they've termed as financial mismanagement for us. And then the allegations against our former CEO, and founder, allegations against him, which there have been 4 investigations, 3 of which have proven that these allegations were unsubstantiated.
What were the allegations against the former CEO?
Yeah, a 30-year-old young man stated that 14 years ago that he was touched.
Mm-hmm.
And so DCFS investigated this twice, and they stated that again these were unsubstantiated. We also paid for there was an independent investigation done, and also unsubstantiated. These allegations unsubstantiated. There's been no eyewitness accounts. There's been no text messages, no photos, and in fact, the young man stopped participating or working with CPS, refused to sign anything that stated that these were true. And some of his friends have stated that he told them that this was an attempt to extort money. And it actually wasn't true. And nothing else has come forward. Usually in these type of circumstances, when one person gives an allegation and you have more and more, coming, nothing of the sort. But our former CEO and founder, he, is in court regarding this now to clear his name, and those efforts are moving forward. And has even come out in court that those in charge at CPS didn't even read the full report and the attachments in which they used in terms of evidence to prove this, that they didn't review all of those. And so like I said, at the end, the truth will come out. But unfortunately, they're using this to try to close urban prep. And this is a term that CPS has used to try to be tricky, to skirt around the law by saying they're taking over urban prep. They're not taking over urban prep. They're closing urban prep. Urban prep owns the copyright and trademark in terms of what we do. So they can't take over what we've done and what we're doing, but they're trying to skirt around the state moratorium that's in place, which makes it illegal to close any schools in Chicago, any phase outs, any consolidations. That the law is very clear that there shouldn't be any or shall not be any until there's an elected school board in 2025.
So let me go back to something you said, that all of your teachers, they're CTU union members, teachers at Urban Prep?
Yes.
All of the teachers at Urban Prep are CTU. So what is CTU's position about the takeover or closure of Urban Prep?
Yeah, that's a good question. They've been very silent. You would think these are teacher positions that will be lost because of the closure. And unfortunately, the CTU has been silent. They have not participated in any of the public hearings, no letters or anything in terms of advocating for the teaching positions of these teachers who are part of their union.
Will those teachers be reassigned to another school, or would those teachers be hired at whatever the new school, for all intents and purposes, that would be at those two locations?
Yeah, that remains to be seen. As a charter school, we're only required to have 75% of the teachers certified. So all the teachers, are not certified, but to work at a CPS school, you have to be certified.
Right.
And so, but we even know with the school closures in 2013, all those certified teachers did not gain positions. And last fall, they won a $9.8 million lawsuit because of the displacement due to those school closures, which indicated that CTU couldn't ensure their employment after those 50 schools were closed in 2013. And so it's just pretty interesting that they've been silent and have not ensured that these teachers would have positions. And so they've actually just been ghost, so to speak, in terms of their support for the teachers who are, part of the CTU.
Yeah. Certainly, again, I could probably understand that because, if a CPS school, 100% of the teachers have to be certified, which means that 100% of them would be CTU, teachers. So I guess I can understand that. And again, the conflict, I guess, is that here is a charter school that many people are not supporters of, and charter schools have not done well across the board, across the country, for educating Black children. So they haven't scored well at doing that. But this I'm considering to be an isolated situation from the other charter schools. So the allegations that are being forged by CPS are because of a now unfounded accusation against the former CEO. Is that why he is now the former CEO, because of that allegation?
Well, in July or August, yes, he decided to resign, to, again, cause no harm to the school, and to make sure that he's able to, fight this in court without, any, blowback to the school.
Okay. And the other allegations are because of financial decisions that the administration made in terms of how they acquired funding or support. And what were those allegations?
All right. So CPS stated they had issue with us choosing to get loans from payday loans. Also in terms of using credit with high interest rates. And even recently, well, not too recently now, but going back to the pandemic, they've stated issue in terms of us getting PPP loans in order to ensure that we continue to employ, our part-time staff, our substitutes, our security, those individuals who need students in the building in order to get paid. And that is just very perplexing to us, because it's the federal government, SBA, who issued those loans, and we were responsible to completing the application for and Chase Bank, and we fulfilled all those requirements. And again, they checked, before and after, and we met the criteria to get those loans, which we were later then credited in terms of not having it being a grant and not having to pay it back. But CPS has put out that they're investigating. They overall say they had issues with charter schools overall getting the PPP loan, but they have highlighted us and included that's part of the investigation that's been going on since 2020, August 2020, and nothing to this point. But they just add that to the list of things to make individuals think, well, with all this, something must be going on. But again, there's been no evidence of any wrongdoing by anyone.
So there's been no evidence of any misappropriation by staff for their own personal benefits, buying cars, whatever. With the monies that you got through PPP or the high interest loans. And so, ironically, when you speak of high interest loans, I'm a private lender, in the real estate world. They call us hard money lenders, where we take our own personal funds and we lend them, at higher rates than what they would get at the banks when they couldn't get money from the banks to help them continue their business. My business is thriving because there are people who are able to have alternative financing so that they can continue their business. And I think we have a pretty good business model. So they were upset that you got loans at a higher interest rate. Did you default on any of those loans? Did you pay them all back?
We paid them all back. No penalty or default on those loans.
And you were still able to meet all of the financial obligations and support for the curriculum, the students, the managing of the facilities as a result?
Absolutely. And
so did the school lose any money as a result of getting those high interest loans?
No. And in fact,
were those loans necessary?
Yes, in order to not cut programming or teacher positions, because this was during the Ronner administration when there was no budget, and CPS cut the budget for charter schools mid-year, two consecutive fiscal years. So we felt it was best to do whatever we needed to do to not cut programming, to not cut teacher positions. And a lot of times, we are frowned upon because we do things differently in terms of the different programs and rituals and things we have to celebrate our students and focus on our students. Where most schools say, you shouldn't spend money, on that. That's not very important. You do have this, idea that, people like urban prep does too much. We're doing too much, these big celebrations of our students. And we felt it was important in terms of based on this society and how Black males are viewed in this society. And you will see many instances of negative imagery and things like that. We need to show the other side of that, because there are Black males excelling. There are young Black males who want to do well and who are achieving. So it's always been important to us to change the narrative and give a counter narrative to how Black boys are doing and how they can be exceptional and celebrate them. And so we do use our funds to do that as well.
So, did you attempt to go to traditional financing, like a, bank, to get financing during that time in order to acquire the funds that you needed to maintain that programming?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm the CAO. I'm not a CFO, so I'm not going to speak too far out of.
I mean, if you don't know,
it's just.
I asked that question whether or not they were able to, or if there was an attempt to do that and they weren't able to get that funding. But that aside, this was during a period of time, a temporary period of time where, there was a Republican governor who refused to sign a budget for 2 years, and your budget was cut. And so in order for you to maintain the programming level, you went out to get financing elsewhere that cost a little more money, but you still were able to meet those repayment obligations.
Absolutely.
So the allegations are the young man who made the accusation against the former CEO that have yet to be founded. I guess they were unfounded. And I guess some people have problems with that language, but I guess, you do an investigation, and your investigation has to prove that something took place, and you say that person has admitted to others that this was, a nefarious attempt to extort money. Okay. So I'm not making a judgment on that one way or the other. And the other allegations are because of administrative decisions. Were any of the allegations about the educational process or performance?
None. And CPS is on record stating that this has nothing to do with the academics. This has nothing to do with the teachers. This has nothing to do with any, non-central office, personnel, nothing of the running of the schools at all. And this is what's so perplexing, because we know of, recent issues as far as CPS schools, where you've had, criminal charges against individuals at schools for inappropriate relationships with students, from, most recent, special education, violation of the law as far as restraining students and things like that happening at schools. And none of these schools are being closed at all. They are removing the individual they feel was responsible, and then that's that. And it's a harsher stance with Urban Prep, which is a Black organization that manages and operates a school for Black boys. And this continues the trend of, Black entities, Black bodies being more harshly dealt with, even if you want to talk about, police brutality or any issue in terms of penalizing Black people for some sense of autonomy, or not given the benefit of the doubt, or being more harshly punished, for any misstep.
Okay, I'm a little bit now. So charter schools, so they're upset with the way that you went about acquiring finances because you went outside of the tradition of getting funding. So if you had gone to a traditional bank, you would have been okay. They would have been okay with that if you had gone to a traditional bank and gotten the same funding at a traditional bank.
Based on the language that they're using, I would assume yes.
Have there been other charter schools that have used non-traditional methods of acquiring funds to support their programming?
I'm not sure. And this is the piece where we talk about, equity. Everyone likes to throw the word equity.
Is there a rule? Is there a rule within the CPS structure and charter schools that says that you have to operate this way? You have to acquire funding through these channels. You can't use other channels. Are there some rules in place?
Now, this is the very interesting thing. The years they're going back to when they had issue with how we, closed these gaps. In each of these years, we were going through charter renewal. So they had all our records. They were aware where we were financially and what we were doing to make ends meet during that time. There was no explanation of any rules or anything. Did we go on financial remediation plan where we had to submit to them monthly statements? Yes, and we fulfilled all those things to the point where last fiscal year we came from under financial remediation. Because we had now gotten to a place where we exceeded the minimum requirement for reserves.
And you had to go into financial remediation for the purposes of what? Not meeting your budgets?
No, for charter schools are required to have a minimum amount in reserves and cash on hand and things like that.
Right.
And we were not at those levels.
Okay.
And then this speaks to the inequity, equity in terms of, we don't have $1 billion donors,
right.
For our schools who are just throwing, cash at us during this time or can help us out during a time like that 2-year period when the state didn't have a budget and the CPS cut budget, mid-year, 2 consecutive years. So, we work very hard to ensure everything's in place. But for the past, 2 years, we were at that level. But I'm making the point that we were under the microscope of CPS with our finances during that time they're speaking about.
Mm-hmm.
So we were doing something out of order against the law and things. Again, they were right there with us because we were going through charter renewal and we had to submit all that documentation because charter renewal requires submission of, so much paperwork, finances and all, areas.
Right.
So this is not something that was, done in, the dead of the night or anything, something they're unaware of.
Right. So, and when you were going through charter renewal, was your charter renewed?
Yes. And our charter was renewed each year.
Through CPS, by CPS.
Yes.
And then the allegations came. Did they come in it seems like those allegations came in out of nowhere. Like almost as though CPS said, well, we want to take over the school. We want to close the school. So we've got to find a way. Now, of course, the accusation with the young men is a serious accusation and a serious charge.
And it was made through a Facebook post. He went on a rant speaking of verbal abuse.
So he didn't actually go to CPS and make this charge?
No, it was a Facebook post. So he went on Facebook speaking his displeasure with our former CEO, saying he, was victim of verbal abuse. And so it was just a rant from that.
Did he go to his parents and have this conversation with his parents?
Well, no, he's a 30-year-old man now.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
if you still have parents and you say that somebody did something inappropriate, I would think that you would have mentioned it to your parents.
No, we have no record or anything of that.
So this was through a Facebook post, and the Facebook post that he went on this rant what happened from the Facebook post?
Apparently, CPS reached out to him.
Oh, CPS reached out to him. He
Right.
did not reach out to CPS?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. And how did that unfold?
Then it unfolded with this investigation. In this investigation, they, informed us of it. Our CEO went on leave, for an extended period of time so they can do their, investigation. And then a year or so later, we get this information back where they stated, they felt it was substantiated.
They felt that it was substantiated, that the
CPS.
allegation, CPS felt that the charge was substantiated. I see. Okay. Well, okay, let's say that they substantiated that allegation, okay, against that individual. That individual should be dealt with and held accountable, the individual. And let's say that the administration made some decisions that were outside of the bounds of managing the school's resources in terms of how they acquired funding. But again, I guess I'm going back to this to say that these are the reasons that CPS are closing the school. You're still meeting the academic graduations and the academic achievements at every level.
Yes.
For educating the black young men there.
Yeah, they've made that very clear.
So what is CPS saying that they're going to now do with the school and that educational infrastructure for young black males that are coming through there?
Yeah, so first, just to go back in terms of what CPS said they substantiated. Again, DCFS completed their report when CPS said they were investigating. DCFS investigated, found nothing. CPS said that they found something. DCFS did another report, again nothing. And then there was also an independent investigator who did a report, and again found nothing.
So CPS did an investigation. They say they found something. Did they share what they say they found with DCFS and with the third party independent?
They shared a report, which they have some issues with that report. They're going to face consequences as far as who they made that report available to, the names they had in the report, unveiling the report is just totally improper. But now again, our former CEO founders in court against CPS currently. And we also now know that the individuals in charge of Title IX coordinator and others, the board, they did not actually read the full report or the attachments, which they used that stated that is evidence to what they concluded, that they didn't even review all those attachments. So they did not fully review the report before it came out, because we know some of the instances in that report are total lies. They state that they investigated the human resources director. They did not do that.
So the problem that I have here, and a lot of people like to weaponize the Chicago Teachers Union, and I hold some individuals responsible for that because of some incendiary things that they've said about CTU years ago, and I think that sort of gaslit, making CTU out to be this big red herring or this big monster. And I'm a supporter of teachers and the CTU for that matter. But it seems to me that the real herring or red herring is CPS, that seem to get a pass by many people. And somehow much of what is going on over at CPS is there's not a lot of attention to it because there's some other principals, black principals, that are being removed from their principalships on allegations that some of them have not even received what those allegations are, and they have been out of their jobs for some time. I think that there is 5 black principals, one of which that I have been paying attention to over at Lindblom, Abdul Muhammad, that has been removed from his school. And I learned from Troy Laravier, who is the head of the Principals Association, that there are 4 other black principals who have lost their principalships. So there seems to be this attack on black people. And of course, there are people who say, well, these sort of things don't happen. And I seem to think that here we have this situation where it's not about the education. It's not about the infrastructure. It is about some questionable business transactions or the way that that business was transacted. Why not address that and leave the productive educational infrastructure in place?
Right. And to go along with that, CPS, they gave us 10 conditions that they wanted us to agree to continue for the 23-24 school year. And a lot of those conditions had to deal with, business financial practices where they wanted, if there was a transaction more than $10,000, it's 2 signatures, anything over 50,000, the board approves, those things, we sort of had issue with that. Because
anything spent over $50,000, the CPS board.
No. Our board had to approve.
Okay.
We had some issues with that because, again, we have not done anything wrong. And to put these things in place, even they want us to have an independent overseer, monitor over our board and things like that. They seemed, more than a little demeaning. We negotiated those, and even, we have to agree to any decision that they are investigating. But we eventually agreed to those 10 conditions in August, agreed to those 10 conditions. And then September 22nd, they came with 12 additional conditions, 6 having to do with our former CEO, with his name explicitly stated, who's an ex-employee, and demanding that we change our urban prep name. And so this went far beyond the pale. And so we refused to sign that.
Mm-hmm.
But as an example, they say, okay, if you do this, then you can move on for a year. And we do that. Then no, now you have to do this. And it was really, one could argue to emasculate us.
Keep moving the goalpost, right?
Right.
Keep moving the goalpost. The typical kinds of situation that black folks have to deal with, to perform. What this appeals to me, or looks to me like, and we'll have that conversation because, like I said, I was contacted about them, but this is one of those things that seem to be. And again, as I said to Craig and others, I want to know more information about it because it's just curious to me that maybe I'm not getting all the information. That's the kind of curious mind I have. But with that aside, because if somebody is doing something that is jeopardizing the education of young people, I say deal with them and hold them accountable. If the administration is not doing what they should be doing or operating outside of the way that they should be operated, the administration should be held accountable for that. Right. I don't see how that translates to upsetting the infrastructure of the educational foundation for those young black men. How did urban prep come to being? How did urban prep become urban prep?
Mr. King, he created urban prep academies. with the vision, along with other Black businessmen and civic leaders, that we wanted to seriously address in terms of what was happening in our city with our Black males. I gave you that data point earlier from the University of Chicago, and we saw it particularly in terms of young Black men in our communities. What options did they have for themselves, and particularly how they were performing in schools? I mean, it was pretty obvious. Mr. King, he was former president of Hales Franciscan high school, and they had success when he was there, and really felt that this was the route and really have improvement in our communities, to positively affect our communities in our communities. And so, along with Mr. King, myself, and other educators, we got together and created this plan. And actually, the urban prep application for a charter was turned down twice by CPS. And it was the third time before we were actually approved. And through that, we stayed true to our mission in terms of educating our young men. But and you can see this in our first applications, before social emotional development became a buzzword and a popular word, we were doing that in early 2000s by ensuring that we provided support for our young men. So we focus just as much on the social emotional development as the academics. So we have our core values. We have 8 core values: resilience, integrity, solidarity, exceptionality, selflessness, faith, accountability, and relentlessness. We like to use the acronym RISE as FAR. Urban Prep young men rise as far if they live the urban prep core values and our creed that our young men say each day. And so our young men understanding that it's not just being educated well or just going to college, but what type of sons are we, brothers, husbands, fathers, and teaching these core values that they're going to need to be successful and to really have our community productive. So that, accountability and solidarity, selflessness, like all those things matter as well, because we don't want our young men just focused on, this assimilationist approach in terms of capitalism, and that's it. And that's, we know the root of a lot of the issues, money, as far as not having, goes on in our community. So it was very important that we teach these core values to our young men
to be
as well.
Decent human beings that makes a contribution to society. I'm not sure, I hear that a lot. We talk about family values, character, conscience, and courage, and all of those things, which are important in urban prep, is doing all of that, but they may have had some, made some decisions that might have been questionable decisions that didn't go bad, could have, but didn't go bad for all intents and purposes, and was there for a certain period of time, but you corrected those. Whatever those concerns were in terms of your business decisions, were those corrected?
Right. And I kind of, push back, or in terms even, I guess, questionable or wrong decisions, because these were brought upon based on the budget, there being no budget in the state of Illinois.
Right.
CPS cutting the budget 2 consecutive years in the middle of the school year. So it was no wrongdoing.
Yeah, not that you
urban
did
prep.
anything illegal, right?
Right,
Not that
right.
you did. I'm not even suggesting that you did anything illegal. But, I asked those questions because I think it's important for the listeners and for the public to understand whether or not you did something wrong, then admit that you did something wrong, or was this just a different approach to meeting the needs, to continue to make sure that you didn't have to do away with certain staffing or programming, for that matter, to make sure that you could provide the education infrastructure for the students.
Right.
So that's why I'm raising that question.
And I definitely agree with that. We did things differently.
Right.
So to
as
speak.
Black people have always had to do, right?
Exactly.
We've had to pay poll taxes, and we paid higher interest rates for homes, or just because we were Black, we were paid higher interest rates when we had to go to traditional banking.
Exactly.
White people got one interest rate, black people got another entrance rate when you went to those institutions. So, but black folks have always found a way to make it happen. But I look at this situation, notwithstanding charter schools, but I look at this situation that you have a functioning, productive infrastructure in place that has a track record, that has performed, that has been evaluated by independent entities that are saying they are doing a good job in doing and exceeding that at educating and graduating young black men at a higher level than the average is. But now CPS is saying, we're going to take that away because you didn't stand on your head at the right angle that we wanted you to stand on your head.
Right.
Essentially is what this sounds like. And do you have any allies in government? Do you have any allies from the mayor? Do you have any allies?
Yeah, that's we've been, reaching out to several entities, several
The governor?
individuals, and the response we get a lot of times has been, this is too political and controversial. And my response typically is, what's controversial about black boys, succeeding and doing well? So this has been a challenge. Organizations like the Coalition of African American Leaders, they've been very supportive since day one. They grilled us. We went over everything with them, and they have supported us since then, since November when this ordeal went down.
What about the aldermen in the areas where the schools are?
Yeah, it's a challenge. We've reached out.
Have you actually had meetings or conversations with the aldermen?
We've attempted, talk to chief of staffs and things like that. As you said, the proliferation, the environment in Chicago and the state has changed significantly. And it is a lot of, anti-charter, beliefs and things like that, or pro CTU. And my question is, this opportunity has provided black parents, black families, the option to
CTU
choose.
is involved in the academic infrastructure. So CTU is playing a role in educating the black men. So is this being driven by CPS? And why is it being driven by CPS to close a school that is educating black young men?
Oh yeah, you are absolutely right. CPS is driving this, and it is another example of appropriation as well, because now they want to take what we've done and now say they're going to take it over and try to use our model to have the success that we've had.
But CPS has not had a good track record. CPS, in and of itself, has not had a good track record for educating black children in Chicago. The Chicago Public School System, CPS, the board, and I believe much of that is because many of the people who served on those boards are political appointees and, are giving those positions to drive the agenda of the people who gave them those positions, not for the purposes of being there to educate children, when I believe that every other municipality in the country has an elected school board other than Chicago.
Right. And when you look at it, they even essentially told on themselves or stated to the world that CPS is not successful educating black children, specifically black boys. Law requires them to, if you're closing a school, one of the options you have to provide for families is a school or schools that are performing at the same level or better than the school that you're closing. Out of the 5 schools that they offered to our families, 0 of them had black student population more than 42%. and there was only the others were in single digits, and another one's like 21%. So they admit that they cannot, do what we've done in terms of, and we've been very intentional as far as we have a thing we say it's a principle at Urban Prep: know your shy, know your
Right.
culture, history, and identity. That's a staple of what we do, and our course offerings reflect that, as well. Freshman year, you're going to have Africana Studies and History. 10th grade, you're going to have African American Lit. In 11th grade, you're going to have African American History. And in senior year, you're going to have civics and social activism. So really instilling, their culture, and knowing their culture, history, and identity, so they know who they are. And so that's very important. Unfortunately, CPS, wants to attempt just to appropriate the work that we've done over the past 17 years. With over the decades, they've clearly been unsuccessful, haven't proven that they're able to do.
All right. We are talking with the Chief Academic Officer for Urban Prep about the CPS takeover. And we'd like to hear what your comments are. If you have some questions, 708-223-8953, 708-223-8953. We would love to get your input, or certainly you can ask a question of our guest. So, what is the next steps? What's the next step that you all are trying to do? This decision has already been made. Is that correct? Has this decision been made that CPS is actually taking over, closing Urban Prep and taking over the school? Has that been made?
Yes, but we filed a lawsuit in terms of challenging this decision to the courts. So we're currently in the Cook County Circuit Court. Last week, we presented in terms of, to the judge, and CPS presented as well. The judge is supposed to, we filed for TRO, a temporary restraining order,
Okay.
to stop this illegal action. The judge will make a decision on that on Wednesday, the 14th. But we are prepared, as we've gone through this whole plan in November with our families, our staff, all our stakeholders.
There will be a court hearing on the 14th? Will there be a court hearing, or just a ruling?
Be a ruling.
Okay,
so there was a court hearing last Tuesday,
okay,
June 6th.
All right. And in this ruling, will this ruling be an open decision in the courtroom, or will the judge be just providing counsel with that decision? And I'm asking that question is because maybe there needs to be, public attendance to show support for Urban Prep for in the courtroom. We have always contended with the citizens to abolish red light cameras. What we have learned is that you require public support to show that this is important, and certainly to fight back against these types of actions coming from a governmental body, and that you could fight back and win. I'm perplexed at the motivation behind what this is. CPS has taken this over, and they're going to do what? If they're successful, they're going to do what with these schools? What's their intentions?
Yeah, so their plan is to have two schools in our two school locations, which they're going to try to mimic what we do. They're going to have a principal over the two campuses, one principal for the two campuses. They have been communicating to.
So these will still be all black male schools? Is that, or will these just be traditional Chicago public schools?
Yeah, so they've been very tricky with the language regarding that, because it's our belief public schools are not able to have a single gender school and state specifically. Like, this is only for one single gender.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been using tricky language, regarding that. Some, literature you'll see, for black male students, male students, and others say, black students. So they've been really tricky with that, but they're trying to get those families to commit to continuing at those locations, even though it's a different school. They even at they were having monthly town hall meetings where only two families would show up. So there was no support. Even back in October, they set a precedent. Never before in the history of charters in Chicago did they state in October that they were not going to renew a school. That is usually done in January or February. They stated explicitly during that meeting that they were making this unprecedented decision to announce in October that they were not going to renew urban prep, to give families the time to transfer out of urban prep now. Since that time in October, we kept 95% of our students and families. So our students and families stayed with us and believed in us. But again, just the nefarious act of trying to get students to transfer out of the school during the school year is also indication in terms of their plans for these new schools. They don't have serious and meaningful plans for it, because why would you want students to transfer out of the current school there, and you're going to put a school there and they can just, you can just keep those students. But I really do not believe they have true intention to see these new schools being successful, even to have one principal over two campuses. As established as we are, I wouldn't make a move like that, because that wouldn't
what
work.
is the how many students are at each one of these campuses?
We have, our Inglewood campus has, about 150, 175, and our Bronzeville campus about 250.
So they're going to have one principal for two schools.
Correct.
One principal for two schools, two different administrations. I guess I'm still trying to understand what's the advantage of CPS closing the schools and taking over? What is the advantage?
So CPS, they know they have a $600 million deficit coming up, and they see our students as money. So this is money. We got about $8 million as far as to function and run our schools, and so they see this as getting that money back. So now they're not giving this money to a public charter school. Now they have control over this money in terms of these students. Mm-hmm. So we believe, again, not caring about the success of our students by any means necessary, they want that money back. And this is really about the money, and as far as how they are going to close these gaps.
Yeah, this is a one of those situations, and I never thought I would find myself in one of those situations, but it seems to be pretty clear cut for me that here is a situation. If you don't want it as a charter school, are these schools, the urban prep, is it a first come first serve, or is it a selective enrollment, or do they have to score to get into one of these campuses? How do students become a student at urban prep?
Charter law does not allow any charter school to be a select enrollment school where you got to test to get in, or you get to review grades and IEPs, nothing like that. And, we typically double the amount of IEPs that CPS has. CPS average in terms of district average of students with IEPs is about 17%. Our schools hit the 30% mark regularly. And so there's no testing or anything. You apply, you can come to urban prep.
You apply and you get in. So so you have 150 at one school and about 250 at other. How many actual available spots do you have between the two campuses?
Each campus has 500 slots, available. We've, felt the brunt of the Black exodus outside of Chicago and the decreased enrollment that, Chicago is experiencing. But also we've experienced, I think in 2016, 2017, CPS created this Go CPS. So now students have to apply through CPS, and this algorithm uh, so appoint students to specific schools.
Mhm.
And so we know since that was put in place, downturn in our enrollment.
Has there been a public hearing at CPS, a public forum, a public hearing about the closure or the taking over of these schools at CPS with the administration and the public? Has there been any type of a hearing?
No. There was a hearing with ISB when we filed our appeal with ISB. So there was a public hearing that ISB was in charge of, in which we had families, different stakeholders who came.
And why hasn't there been one for CPS? There normally is a hearing at CPS for certain decisions or decisions that they're making. There's a public hearing. Why wouldn't there be a public hearing for this? Has there been a hearing requested by the administration?
Yeah. So again, this is another example where they went outside the box to enact this decision on urban prep, because again, charter renewals are, you go through the process, August through November, and then the public hearing is, depending on the year, December, January, February, and then 30 days later, a decision. And for urban prep, they skipped all of that. They decided to not renew us in October, and the other schools they stated there that they were renewing all the other charters. And so other charters who did have academic performance problems, who did have actual operations and SPED problems, they renewed them automatically, but did not urban prep. And so we did not go through that public hearing space that the other charter schools went through.
Well, what can we do? What can what are you all asking for the public to do in this matter? And I think that the first thing I can think of is that that courtroom, or certainly if there is going to be, if the judge is going to be making a decision, who is the judge?
Yeah. Oh wow. I think her last name is Hall. It's a Zoom, so they did the hearing through Zoom.
Okay.
And definitely go into the Urban Prep website, www.urbanprep.org, to #SaveUP. Definitely complete a petition. Speak with your elected officials, about this. Reach out to the mayor. We believe there is, opportunity to end this. That's still in the power.
Right.
Of CPS, the mayor's in charge of the board of CPS. So we do believe, that is the case, and we are going to continue to push no matter the results. If we get an adverse decision on Wednesday, we will be moving to the appellate court.
All right, we have a call. We have a call. Caller, we need you to lower your audio. There you go.
I did. And
hey.
Good evening, Mark.
Hey, Don.
It's actually Don. Mark, I appreciate how hard it is for you to wrap your arms around this, because it sounds totally crazy. And I think the problem is that you're trying to deal with reason rather than excuse. What's obviously happened here is the board made a decision for whatever reason that was, and then they looked for a way to implement it, and that's what's going on here. It sounds even more horrible when you think that this is a black-white issue in a system that is so black, the Chicago public school system. I would be willing to venture a very large bet that the people that are doing this are as black as we are. There's other reasons going on here, and I think what's been said is this has actually been decided, it's going to be implemented, but I think at this point you need to try to salvage what it is that's there and say, let's keep it as what it is, let's actually try to do those things that were working rather than just fight it and have it fizzle out.
Well, I think if that were the case, Don, I think that would be a negotiated, a settlement or salvage of it. But from what he is saying is that they're completely want to dismantle it. They don't want to save the infrastructure. They want to dismantle the whole thing.
Right, but they seem to be saying we want to keep it as these two schools that would be under one system as they are really now, and we really be able to do that. What seems to be going on, though, is this all or nothing fight that says it either is or it isn't. And I'd rather see something left after this is all done. I think there are obviously huge positives there and things that worked. And I'd rather see those spread throughout the Chicago public school system than just go away.
Listen, I am in agreement because, as I said, I'm not a proponent of charter schools because of just their historical performance, nationwide. However, this is an isolated situation where we see where they have actually been performing. They have results over a long period of time. I agree with you. I believe that all public schools in Chicago should be performing at the level that urban prep is, and Walter Payton, and what's the other school out there? All of those. I agree with you, but I am willing to wager that that's not what we're going to end up with at the end of the day.
We're not willing to talk about the reality. And I will say it because I'm nobody and it really doesn't matter. What I've heard was that the reason CPS wanted to shut down urban prep was because they felt that their founder was grooming young black men and turning them into homosexuals. And that's not one case, but they tried to find one case to do this. So let's talk about the reality rather than hiding behind it.
Well, I believe that everything should be talked about, whatever it is. It should be on the table. It should be talked about whether it's true, if it's an accusation, if it's true. I've never heard of that. And so you said you heard that the reason that CPS wants to do this is because King was trying to turn black males into homosexuals.
Right, right. There was a grooming situation going on there. It wasn't, and so what they looked for, and what we're now talking about, is that there might have been one case that they can prove in what was going on. But the reality was that they were talking about it. It wasn't. They were talking openly about it, and I think that was the fight that went, and it turned into other things. Then they looked for reasons beyond that. And the reasons beyond that were, let's say this out loud, that the school had to take out a payday loan. That's absurd that should have to happen that way. But that was the silliness of what was going on in Illinois at the time.
Right.
I appreciate that.
Right.
But so as we try to talk about this, as these pick every individual case and try to figure out what it was, that's just not going to work. They've already pushed past that, and it has to be, how do we salvage the things that were good from it? Because unless there's a court here in Illinois that's going to turn this around, I think it's a done deal, right?
Well, it's not a done. You
right,
can answer that question.
Right. It's not a done deal. We're in court now. The judge will come back with a decision on this Wednesday. If we get it,
so you've had the hearing, you're waiting for the judgment. The next thing that happens is the judgment, right?
Right, which we are prepared. If we get adverse decision, we are prepared to go to appellate court, because this is a violation of the state law that's in place regarding a state moratorium, no school closings until there's an elected school board in 2025. So we feel we do have a leg to stand on regarding that. And then just one point wanted to correct you on is, see those who making the decisions as we went down, your CEO of CPS, the board president of CPS, at the time, the superintendent for ISB, the president of of the board of ISB, what do they all have in common? They were not black. They were not white.
Wait a minute. Who was the CEO of CPS when this started?
When this, I'm talking about currently, and when these things
no,
went down.
No, he's talking about the process. He's talking about the process of taking over the school. When it started, when they came up with the decision to close the school or take over the school, who was the CEO at the time?
Martinez
Right.
was. Pedro
But that's
Martinez.
the end of the process. Who was the superintendent when they put you on notice and sent you through all of the Q&A questions? Who was the CP? Who was it then?
Martinez.
Who?
Pedro Martinez. We did not go through this during the term of Janice Jackson. We didn't have a split.
Wait. Martinez was not the CEO during Rhonda.
No. You said during the questioning and when they put us on notice regarding these allegations and regarding not renewing our charter. That's what I'm speaking of, which took place in 2021.
You're talking about the process, so that it's clear for the audience. Don is talking about the process of them making the decision to close it. When did the process start, and who was the superintendent when that process started?
There was no issues in terms of closing Urban Prep Inglewood and Urban Prep Bronzeville until negotiations ended, or they gave us these 12 new conditions.
When was that?
This was September of 2022.
Okay.
When after we agreed to the initial 10 conditions, in which they were going to give us a 1-year charter renewal, they then came back with 12 additional new conditions in September 2022. Mm-hmm. And then that's when they threatened, if we didn't agree to those 12 conditions, they were going to close us, not renew us.
Right, I hear exactly what you said, but think back to what you just said.
What's that?
I said, I hear the way you said it, and you're right, there are differences at different points. But what I'm saying is, when this really, quote, started, before, as you said, when they gave you the 10, the option they gave you was do this or what? Wasn't the or what, we're going to shut you down? Wasn't that the implication even at that point?
Right, and those conditions were given to us in February 2022. So we negotiated.
I thought that was 2021.
No, 2021 was when they made us aware of they are investigating these allegations.
Right. It's been a long time. And Mark, I hear you. I'm with you. But the time to show support was back in 2021 and 2022. We're now at the point now just to go hear the judge say, okay, this is what I've decided. I don't think he's going to change when he walks out and sees people in the room.
Well, hopefully, the law is on their side. I hopefully the law is on their side in this matter. And if they believe, if the law says that there can be no school closures, and if this is technically a school closure, then you may have a legal argument there. But we won't know until that is until that ruling comes out, which is Wednesday.
Right. It's Wednesday. Unfortunately, with the kind of questioning that the judge gave, we're prepared for the appellate court because it is pretty clear in terms of this is a school closing. A new board will be in charge, new curriculum, new practices.
Do the teachers have to reapply? Everybody
Absolutely.
has to reapply for positions at the two schools. So, in effect, you're closing one school and opening, or closing two schools and opening two others.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll see how the judge interprets that. on Wednesday. It's going to be very interesting. It's an interesting question. All right, Don, thanks so much for your call. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, again, the lesson that we learn over and over, to try to be involved early.
Well, the question becomes, and that's true, but the question becomes is, don't we have to know earlier?
Well, this has been out there. This story has been going for a while, I think. I've at least heard it. And I think
I just recently heard it within, let's say, the last couple of months. When was it publicly announced that CPS was taking over Urban Prep?
October.
Okay. So we're talking different announcements. The announcement that you should have heard of and paid attention was that King had to resign and that they were investigating. That was the beginning of the process. That's when we should have been, needed to do something.
Yeah. I guess I was asleep. I guess I was asleep on that one because
there is another possibility here. And that possibility is we have a new mayor. And the board reports to the mayor, and the mayor can come in and make a decision because you guys in court are just fighting over the technicalities. You're not fighting over the merits. It's just the technicalities.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's the interesting question. Does the mayor have the power to reverse this? Does the mayor have the power to reverse it? Or to shut it down?
I absolutely believe so. The mayor's in charge of CPS.
Have you all gone to this mayor, and asked for the mayor's intervention?
Absolutely. We reached out. We haven't been able to have, meeting. We reached out to different surrogates and such and others. And we are being told this is, not something at this time, want to get involved in. It's in the courts.
Wow. Okay. All right. Interesting. Very interesting. Okay. I think this is a very unfortunate thing. I think it's a very unfortunate thing, but I still think that it is emblematic of what happens when Black people are actually doing things that work for Black people, is that they find a way to shut it down.
You're absolutely correct. And we can go through history in terms of the many instances and examples of that. When there's Black autonomy, Black people are running and in charge of success and exemplifying those things we want in our communities. They looked
and
to
all of our, which is why I believe that it is intended for our public school systems not to work, because all of our public schools should be performing and doing what Urban Prep is doing. All of our schools should be doing that. Then we wouldn't have to have this so-called separation. Well, we're going to have more.
Can I make one more suggestion, Mark?
Yeah.
Because there's something going on right now, and this is really the perfect timing for it.
Okay.
If you really believe in this, and I believe you do, and can tell the story, then the story to tell it to is Henry Crown, who right now has said, I'm going to spend $1 billion fixing Black problems. If you want some money, that's the place to go. And it does two things. If he gives you money, he also gives you the blessing of the city. And Brandon will have to do whatever the hell he wants him to do. But that's really where it's at. You know what I'm talking about. He made the announcement actually about a week ago.
Yes.
That he and the people down on LaSalle Street are going to come up with the money.
Okay.
Let this be a way of doing it. If it's about money, as I said, that's a double dipper.
Yeah, Don, personally, I don't believe it's just about money. I don't believe it that is. If it's just about money, I don't believe that it is just about money. This is Black people that are performing for Black people, and they have found a way to disrupt it. And that happens historically.
I agree with you, and I would hope that it puts a spotlight on the black folks that are doing that to us. Because in my opinion, as I said earlier, I think if you look up the chain of the people in CPS who touched this, there's a lot of black hands on this.
Well, there's certainly some black hands on it because, with those other black principals that have, for all intents and purposes, good track records, but they have been removed from their principalships. And there is a black person that is, or he's supposed to be black, that is heading that up. I forget his name, who is what do they call those?
Chief Raza, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. And then there are individuals on the board as well who, instead of having a conversation with us about any of these things, just believed what was in the report and made some salacious and slanderous statements during that October meeting and had to be put on notice for saying such statements with no evidence of any of these allegations.
Well, I have contended for a long time that we, for whatever reason, have been reluctant to realize that there are some black people that are not for black people, and those people need to be exposed. They need to be exposed as to what they are doing. I don't know why we are reluctant to do that. I just don't understand it. I don't understand it.
I don't understand it either, but I agree with you totally. And Chicago is full of it.
Yeah.
And because if you look around, I mean, it's really amazing. I just watched one of the TV things where they ran through, white shirts with gold leaf. It's all black. The chief of police, the fire department, every one of those agencies is a black person who sits there and watches this go on.
Yeah, and there's not just one black person. There's a bunch of black people that are in those top positions, in those positions. So, well, again, I guess that comes back to why are we allowing for that to go on? Why are we doing that? Why are we allowing for that to go on? What's the reluctancy of us when we know this sort of thing that's happening? Why do we continue to just let it happen?
Because it was the easy way, and because for many of us it was the way out. And there's a lot of people out there. The other thing, and this is really crazy. As I was, the new interim guy was in there, and they talked about his wife who was also a cop. That we have all of these double dippers that are in there that are. It really, I don't get it. I don't get it either. And unfortunately, you're right. We let it continue. And it is us that lets it continue, though, and it's time to stop it. And maybe with all of the connection with CPS, CTU, and the whole school system that's failing us, and the mayor who comes out of that, maybe it's time to fix that. Maybe there's a way to do that.
Well, I certainly, man, I tell you, I don't think it's impossible. It may be hard. I don't think it's impossible. I just think that we have to have the will to do it. I don't believe that that it can't. I just believe that we get to the point we either will or we won't. It's not can't. It's we will or we won't. And I'm still. I don't believe that. That we're comfortable with it. I certainly don't think that we're comfortable with it because we have enough conversations about how wrong it is. And for us to let this happen, and I apologize myself for not getting involved with it earlier. But we got to have a better infrastructure to deal with these things, that they can't just continue to dismantle things that are working for black people at their call.
And especially based on flimsy reasoning for that, when you have many examples, as I mentioned earlier.
By black people.
Right.
By black people.
And
by black people.
And we have this idea, with the exception of a few, like Coalition of African American Leaders, Dr. Reverend Moss, Trinity, been very supportive. Father Flake been very supportive, but conversations with others has been, this is too political and too controversial. And so individuals worrying about their little piece that they have and it being impacted.
Yeah.
And, I like to call, plantation mindset, thinking. And we have to hold those accountable in terms of, as Cole stated in their letter that they put in the Sun-Times, the ad they put in Sun-Times, saying they will hold the governor and the mayor accountable in terms of in 4 years, when they say this is what they are going to do for black people. And this is an opportunity to step in. And not what we said we we're going to do, what we've done historically for almost 2 decades in the education of black boys, and being unwilling to really dig into this and find a way for us to resolve these issues without closing this educational institution that has served the black community for 2 decades.
The other part of this, Don, is CPS taking this over. When you talked about saving the infrastructure, because that's why I continue to say that, is that, okay, you're upset with some people who made some bad decisions, but the education infrastructure is fine. Okay, do away with the people who made the bad decisions, leave the infrastructure in place. But they can't do it because it's going to no longer be a charter school. So it can't be an all black male school, and you can't have the curriculum there.
Right. And
are there any other single sex charter schools?
There were. So we were able to open back in 2006 because CPS did have an all female charter school, young women's charter academy. They came in existence in 1999. And so that allowed, us to have, all male charter school, but they've since closed. I think they closed in 2015.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to have to leave it right there, Don, because we're out of time. Thanks so much for calling, Don. We'll have to come up with some ideas. If you think of some.
Thanks for bringing me here, Mark.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Don. Okay. Listen, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you, Dennis Lacewell. I want to do all that I can to help this. And like I said, it's been a perplexing thing for me because, I'm not advocating for charter schools, but I'm certainly advocating for urban prep to stay in place. We're going to continue this conversation offline. I want to work with you all and with the other organizations, and let's fight to turn this around to save our black boys. All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the People Show with Mark Wallace and Charles Thomas. Charles Thomas will be back with me on next week. And until that time, you all have a great evening. Good night.